Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Green Party Series out of Illinois. My name is David Rich. I am your host for this evening with my co-host, Calvin Tomashko. Calvin, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Good to see you.
Great. We have a very exciting, I'm very excited about this guest. We have Greg Copen. Is that how you pronounce it?
Kepin
Okay.
works too.
What's that?
I said Copen or Kepin works, but Kepin is
Kevin, okay. Okay. He is the executive director for Lake County Farm Bureau. We're going to get his more of a detailed answer out of him in a moment, but the Farm Bureau is something that goes national. It's a national organization that sort of just allocates itself by state and then sometimes by county or region or what have you. So thanks for coming on the show, Greg. Appreciate it.
You bet. Happy to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So you came highly recommended by two friends of my mutual friends. Excuse me. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in farming, and then into the Farm Bureau, what it is, when it started, as much of the history as you can divulge.
Sure, you bet. Sounds good. I grew up on a farm in Wheeling, just south of here in the Lake border. It was a family vegetable farm that was, I was the fourth generation. Grandparents started it over 100 years ago, or great grandparents, and kind of went through the family. We had a roadside stand that we sold vegetables at every year. So while other kids were playing sports, I was working in the fields. We didn't have the big, massive technology tractors. We had the old-fashioned type tractors. So yeah, we did that every summer. Grew up around here. Went away to Indiana U and just got homesick and came back here and ended up running for office when I was 19 as an alderman in Prospect Heights, and that started my kind of political farming marriage, I'll call it. So I ran for office. I served 2 terms on the city council down there in my early 20s. Loved it, and started with Farm Bureau right out of college as well. I didn't go for an ag degree. I actually went for a government relations and a marketing degree, and the ag I just kind of learned growing up. So started with Farm Bureau in 98 as their assistant manager, and then in 2004 took over as exec director. So it's been a great career, and I said I get to do 2 things that I love, and that's deal with the political side and deal with the agriculture side. I just don't get my hands as dirty as I used to when I was a kid.
Which is okay.
It is.
Yeah, that's cool. What made you interested in getting into politics in the first place?
You know, I saw a need. My dad was a firefighter down there. And I remember he always said, we got these politicians making decisions that really aren't informed and knowing what's going on. And that was the hardest thing. And I said, well, I'm going to prove you wrong, Pops. My parents are very unpolitical. I said, I'm going to run for office. And I think mine's the only sign they begrudgingly put up in their front yard when election time came. But I wanted to do the right thing. And I think I wanted to be involved and have a stake, also know what I was doing. So when I got in there, I rode along with the streets and sand guys. I rode around with the police department. I rode along with our finance director. And I said, if I'm making decisions, you really need to know what those ultimate decisions are going to be. And I think that was the most important thing for me. And that's kind of been my motto throughout my life, is when I get involved with something, know what you're actually doing and just don't show up to take up space.
How refreshing. Very cool. Calvin?
Yeah, that's so funny because last week I mentioned to our guests that a belief that I have from a friend of mine through college was that there should be more of the people experienced in the fields, not the fields of
no pun intended,
the studies, right? The fields of expertise, and that they should run for office. That there should be more people just from the random professions rather than just purely politicians. So that's really great that you felt spurred to go and run. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what that was like. Running on the position of I have experience in agriculture.
Yeah, it was. My experience was really agriculture, and that was it when I was 19 years old. And my campaign slogan is "We'll grow together," on farming and my age. I think I passed out pumpkin seeds my first election, had a pumpkin contest to see who grew the biggest pumpkin, and I gave away a prize. But it was a 3-way race, and the incumbent was in, and I just kind of said, this is who I am, and ran as not a politician, but just a citizen that cares and wants to be involved. And it's kind of been, I wanted to learn, and I think you never stop learning, no matter if you're working for the Farm Bureau, you're on a city council, you're on any public board, any school board. I think when you think you know all the answers, it's time for you to retire and let somebody else do that, because there's somebody else that has maybe better answers or a different way to look at it. So I think that's important, especially in today's political realm out there. Get folks that are there sometimes too long and become expert in everything. And we're not experts in everything. We've got that ability to learn.
Yeah, no, that's very cool that you have that attitude. That's again refreshing. Some people just want to hold on to political power as long as they possibly can for no other reason than that, I don't know, they're power hungry. I have no clue. But no, it's true. I mean, I think one of the criticisms or advices to any democratic system, a democratic society, is always the most dangerous thing about a democracy is the uneducated public, right? No, extending beyond that, when you have politicians running for offices, especially at the national level, because there's so much power involved, and you're just anybody that you really don't understand how to govern, you don't understand what you're getting into, the decisions you're going to make concerning bills and laws, and you don't have any background knowledge in any of this stuff. That's kind of a scary situation to me. Anyway, I don't want to get too political.
Yep.
So tell us about the history of the Farm Bureau, if you could.
Yeah, Farm Bureau. Yeah, we started Lake County and Illinois for the matter. About 105 years ago, a group of farmers came together in Illinois and decided that they needed to have, I'll call it the early Facebook group. They wanted to come together and have an opportunity to exchange ideas. So they were the original Facebook community, where they talk about, what's going on in your farm, and why isn't my soil working, and what seeds are you using. So they started as a cooperative. And then every county in Illinois, including Lake County, developed their own county farm bureau board because they wanted it's a grassroots organization. So the idea is they wanted to come from the county and work their way up. And that's how it works today on policies and issues. So Lake County started. I think in our history we've probably had about 30 presidents or so over the years, all involved in agriculture. The board size is anywhere from, we have 12 members now. They had about 15 to 20 members back in the day that are just dedicated volunteers that want to make sure farming stays alive in Lake County and Illinois, and be an educational outlet and a tool, not only for the farmers, but as it's changed to be that educational arm to the consumer too, to provide them with the information that they need to make the right decision and understand what actually goes on in agriculture today.
Speaking of agriculture today, let's talk about some current issues going on. It's pretty specific as to Lake County, so we don't need to talk about global warming as much, but we should talk about farming practices, traditional versus, let's just say, non-conventional, non-traditional. I don't want to say specifically organic because it's actually a bit wider than that. Like I said, I was certified in organic farming and gardening, and there's some things that we learn, and you can probably confirm or deny some of this stuff. Like for example, there's a no-tilling movement coming up. So because we discovered that what happens when you till soil is that you just destroy this beautiful microbiological web that's already established to feed the roots of the plants. That's why you're constantly having to amend it every year and that kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that and what's going on there, at least in Lake County?
Yeah, no-till rotate crops farming isn't something that's going on for years. Something we did growing up on our farm, and something our guys around here are doing too. Because people a lot of times will drive by a field and say that field looks perfect. Every farmer doesn't want to weed; they want it to look black dirt, and then you got the other guy that goes, "It doesn't look like the guy touched it after last fall." And those are the farmers that are doing the no-till. So it may look that rough field that it looked like in the fall, and you say in the spring how's something growing through there, and they'll just do the no-till farming for them. It's to conserve the soil, to keep the nutrients in there. Of course, it's less. They're not spending as much gas, and they're not their time on. They're having to till it too. So there's definitely an advantage to that, and it's something that we've seen, over the past 20 or 30 years, really take off up here too. And really in Lake County, it's hard to if a farmer doesn't have to move a tractor from point A to point B. He's happy with that because it's brutal to get around this county nowadays with tractors. So we are not set up for farming the way we were before. So yeah, there's absolutely the organic side. We have on a large level, you don't see the organic farming, but there's certainly some farmers that even on their own little plots will do some organic farming just to test things out to see if they can if they have to put less pesticide or fertilizer in the ground. That's a savings to them too, and something they definitely want to consider. So the less inputs they have to put in, the less money's going out of their pocket. Most of our farming up here tends to be corn and soybeans. Right. So on that level, there's not an organic market. We should say you're not going to find that wide range, big organic corn soybean farm up here. But there certainly are some of the smaller farms, Prairie Crossing, for instance, in Grays Lake.
Yeah.
Their farm has been organic. There's a couple others that are trying to get certified. And as you probably know, it's a process there. So you can't just say, boom, I'm organic.
No, it's a very rigid
there's
process.
a long process. Yeah. And it's good. And I think that people that are purchasing organic products, I think it's safe enough to know that, hey, we have these requirements we have to follow to truly say that it is organic. But we do. The University of Illinois, we partner with. They're a neighbor on our campus. They have a lot of programs they put on with their master gardeners. They've got about 300 master gardeners that are looking at organic, non-organic, what to do in your yard. So I think there's a market for both, and there's an opportunity for both. And I think it's up to the individual, just like it is when they go to the store. Do you want to buy the organic milk, or do you want to buy the others? It's a choice.
Right. Calvin?
Gotcha. We've had a guest on before that has been talking about ETO emissions, so ethylene oxide, and it's a recognized carcinogen, and they've been trying to get the EPA to move on this, to get inspectors to go through the process, because they're people are worried about the effects of this long term, and even in the short term. And I'm sure this is something that sits on a farmer's mind too, because you don't want any types of emissions or something affecting the soil in a negative way, or the water supply for that matter. So I was curious if you know anything about the ethylene oxide incidents at all, or just in general, what kind of work is done with regards to the EPA in regards to farming.
I've followed it a little bit. I know we have the issues up here that we've had in the last couple of years, so I followed it just kind of as a resident more than anything. Our guys, we haven't dealt with it or really haven't been asked for policy on it, so nothing's come out that I'm aware of that we have right now. But when it comes to the EPA, as I said too, our farmers want to put less on their land than they have to, because we kind of call them the original stewards, or the original environmentalists back in the day. I mean, they were the folks that they lived off the land. They needed that land to survive, and the last thing they wanted to do was harm that land for future generations. So they do deal with the EPA. There are regulations that, of course, have to be followed when it comes to that and spraying. And they take a test to be able to spray every year, so they're getting permits for that. And it's an ongoing process. No longer is it just the farmer that jumps on his tractor and has the straw in his teeth and is just out there on the field. The majority of our farmers now, like the one young man we were talking about before, they've got at least a 4-year education. They've gone on to some other technical school too. So it takes a lot to figure out, just technology alone. It takes an education. You just can't throw that guy in a tractor and say, go farm. So it's a whole different game out there than it was, even 1, 2, or 3 generations back. You throw those old farmers in it now and they'd go, what in the world are you doing? So it's a lot. It's not how we did it back then, is what they tell you. And but we do get those adapted. Even our farmers that have been in, those in the 50s or 60s that have been around for a while, they've learned that they had to adapt to it too, just to make their farm profitable and to make sure that they're following all the regulations too. I would say those farmers are feeding their families and their neighbors and their grandkids. So the last thing they want to do is produce anything that would ever be harmful to any of those people as well. That's truly how they look at it. They're providing food for America, and they want to make sure that it's the safest and the best product they can put out there too, and the most abundant.
So nothing's really coming up or affecting the soil from a third party. So I know the farmers are very connected with the land. My grandparents were farmers, and my parents grew up on that farm.
Sure.
So of course, they don't want their local community to be affected. They don't want the milk from the dairy cows to be tainted or anything. So that's why I brought up third party actors, where we do have a problem with, like, there's a profit motive behind using certain chemicals to clean medical equipment, for instance, and that's where the ETO stuff comes from. So I'm glad to hear that it seems like there's not any major rumblings with the plants. We can focus on it in different ways, affecting different things. So glad to hear that.
Yeah, it is good. And I always say too, everybody wants that beautiful lawn. I was just looking at mine today and looking at the lines in it. It looks green. It looks perfect. But, it's interesting. And farmers, they always question how much fertilizer they put on. Is it polluting? But homeowners, and there's some studies on there, I don't have the facts in front of me, but the regular homeowner that gets 4 or 5 lawn applications a year is doing more harm to the system sometimes than our large farmers are, because our guys are a little more trained than the ChemLawn guy out there that's just going right around. So it's I think it's a learning process on what we all can do to help the environment and what we all can do to save those waterways and make sure our lands stay clean and pure, and they're there for 5 more generations from now, because they're not producing any more land, and it's not going to be we're definitely not going to gain any more of that. We're going to continue to lose it too. So let's make sure the land we have is going to be high quality for many years to come, generations to come.
Yeah, and some of these lawns can turn into raised garden beds as well, and get people with their hands dirty and back and connected to the land a little bit.
Yeah, it's totally true. My neighbor next door to me, I mean, she's out there, and I call it like Little House on the Prairie. They got little vignettes of everything going on there. And I said, good for you. They don't have the beautiful lawn like my little green lawn is, but they've got a whole different thing going on over there that they, that's, and it adds, I think we all need to do our part to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of land and quality of land, so let me ask you about this and what you know about this, Greg. Illinois is called the prairie state, right?
Yep.
My understanding is that at one point Illinois was like 65 to 67, something like that, percent prairie. Now it's like 0.1% prairie.
Sure.
And my understanding is maybe 1%. It's super a lot. It's a lot less. And my understanding is that because a lot of that had to do with farming and agricultural practice up until now. Do you know much about that? I mean,
I don't. I can tell you an example of a change that went back. I live right by the Round Savannah Prairie right here in Grays Lake, and that used to be Picket Fence Farm back in the day. It's several thousand acres, I think, when you look at it. And it was a farm. They had cattle on it too, so it was an active farm. When the forest was reserve, I actually served on the restoration committee where we sat down on the forest preserve level with them and restored the entire property back to its original prairie. So it's kind of cool to see how it went from what it was to an agricultural use back to a prairie use too.
Right.
So we don't deal with a lot of it up here just because our area is a little wet and a little different.
More of a wetland.
Yeah, just the amount of wetland we've got up here in the lakes that makes it a little harder. So yeah, that's the extent of the prairie side. Most of the farms around here have been farmed for many years and are changing. But even Prairie Crossings is another good example of where they've changed that back to a very different community than you'd see even in my subdivision here in some other areas.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the clay in the soil. That's like every local gardener's like just thorn in their side is the damn clay. Working at the nursery, it's just like, I'm sorry, but there's just a lot of clay around here. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Don't use a really, like Calvin said, make a raised bed. You can control the soil medium all you want.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
clay and rocks are probably two of our arch enemies up here, especially with farmers. The rocks break everything. We have very different land up here. Even where we grew up, where I grew up in Wheeling, just over the county line. We had some of the blackest, richest dirt that you would see, and then as you came north, you kind of get some rough land. So not only do we have short growing seasons up here, like Michigan, and some issues with that, but we don't have the best land as some of these other farmers do. When you go down, when you're traveling down south on I-55 and some of those other areas, we can look at it. It looks like good, rich land, as I always describe it. We've got just over, let's say, about 28,000 acres of farmland still being farmed in Lake County, which is good.
How much?
Happy. About just over 28,000 acres that we've got still
in Lake County. Wow.
Yeah, the forest preserve I think has about 30,000 acres in forest preserves, and then I think we have just under 30,000 right now. I haven't looked at the number in the last couple of years, but it's always hovered around there. A lot of that in the late 80s is when we saw that number really take a dive, when all the housing, the 80s, early 90s, when all the housing communities went up, when we started seeing Gurney Mills and a lot of these other big malls start to take off. So that was the biggest era where we saw the largest swaths of farmland just going to developers. That's
really interesting because I grew up in Mundelein. I currently live in Grays Lake, and I remember like being in Mundelein High School, grade school, junior high, and high school, and like looking out at the field across the street, and then all of a sudden, poof, houses everywhere. I mean, just crazy. It was crazy. to see the transformation happen. You're right; it just completely took over, and I don't know. We'll see. And they're still doing it. You know, they remove all the topsoil, they build these communities, and then they sell the topsoil back to us.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
instead of
it
just
is.
leaving it
It's exactly they buy it back. But yeah, and we see those changes, and it impacts our farmers too, because they it changes the topography of their land. It changes the water runoff and the drainage, and they break field tiles, and they've got ponding where they never had it before. So those developments really hurt the surrounding farmers. Do have to be we have stormwater management. Some of the agencies here that actually really do a good job of making sure we continue to protect that land that we still have that's in production ag.
Okay. Calvin?
Yeah, I'm curious about policies that you advocate or just informationals that you give to representatives and leaders of the community, and Sure. What is the most important ones, and what are ones that probably surprise them? I'm sure there's some surprise reactions like, oh, that's how this works. Oh, we need to take into account this. So I'm really curious what stories you might have on that.
Yeah, the challenge was about 20 years ago, we saw even legislators being removed from generations from the farm that really didn't understand the concept and why things were done this way and not that way. So we started our adopted legislative program that has probably been one of our best programs. So a legislator gets elected and we immediately reach out to them and share with them who we are and the resources we can offer them if they want to. And we have a really good working relationship with, I think anybody that's in office, no matter what party they are, everybody wants to eat, everybody understands agriculture. They know that's where we're from. That's how it started. So they want to keep ag alive, which we're very fortunate. But we will find a southern county, say Henry County, which is down in the central part of the state, will adopt one of our legislators up here. So they get a relationship where the legislator will come up here. The legislator will go down there and ride a tractor for the first time. They'll ride in the combine in fall. They'll hang out on the family farm and have a picnic. They'll go to the little school where they've got, only 100 kids in the classroom and that's it for the whole school. So they'll see how these farmers live in these rural communities. And then we will take those farmers, there's usually those farmers and my counterpart in that area and bring them up here for a couple of days. And once they get past the fear of driving in traffic with our roads, they they'll spend a couple of days. And depending on the district, if they're coming up to the Gurney area, we'll take them to Great America. We'll take them to some of our. We'll take them over to. I'm trying to blank right now, but the Illinois Beach State Park to show them what we have up there. We have some open lands. We've taken them to Adelaide Stevenson High School to show them their school of 100 kids, and we've got Stevenson High School that is just the mega school up here. So I think both the legislator goes down there and his or her eyes pop open, and the farmers come up here and their eyes pop open. And they're both very happy that they're living in their separate areas because they don't always adjust well. But it gives that legislator an opportunity when they're on the floor, maybe voting on a hog issue, or which we don't have livestock up here in Lake County anymore. It just doesn't work in that urban-rural divide that we have. But when they're voting on a hog issue or a right to farm issue, they'll remember Farmer Bob, who they were down on his farm and his combine. He was talking about those hogs and what that does in the process. So it becomes a conduit and an opportunity for them to learn from those farmers. And it's really worked out well. It's the best education we can actually give. It's like a field trip when you were in school. You didn't really understand what was going on at Brookfield Zoo, and you went there, and then you went there and talked to people. So I think that's something we've really learned over the years that we enjoy, and I really get a bond with those farmers too, those legislators and farmers. I say sometimes they talk to them more than they talk to me, and I'm in their district. So, but we always laugh. It's good. It's good for them to have that. It's an important part, and again, like we talked previously, it's a learning curve. They're not going to be experts in farming. They don't know what's going on in farming. They don't know all the latest and greatest. They might be an insurance broker by trade or something else. So we give kudos to those legislators that take the time out of their schedule because they're busy as it is to actually do that.
Right. So being in this middle position of like farmer to politics, farmers to government thing, and straddling both sides there, as too many things in this country, probably most countries, things get politicized very quickly. If you're a Democrat, you all believe this stuff, and if you're Republican, you believe this stuff, and neither one believes the same things and that kind of thing. And the environmental issue is definitely that way in this country. There's a tendency, I'll just use climate change as an example to show my point, but we're going to go back to farming in a second. If you're Republican, you tend not to believe it, or so they say. If you're Democrat, you tend to believe it, or so they say, that kind of thing. When it comes to farming policies, regulations, stuff like that, do you see that same sort of that specific political division?
And that is the one good thing is we're pretty much a non-political party organization. So there's Democrats we've supported, there's Republicans we've supported, and there's Democrats we've not gotten along with, and Republicans we've not gotten along with. So it just happens. But I will tell you, the majority of the time, vast majority of the time, when it comes to ag issues, really don't know what initial is behind the name of this R or a D or an independent. It's just people that I think it's like motherhood and apple pie. They feel that connection to the farm still because they hear about it. It's becoming a novelty in some areas. So I think they want to support agriculture. When it gets to the national level, of course, you've got some more issues when it comes to some things with the EPA and some of the other things that there are very different opinions in the parties, of course. But again, it becomes a process, and I think that's why we have the balance of folks that are in there, and I think we're thankful for that. But yeah, when it comes to parties, we really don't have there's not an issue with either. I think they both want to see how they can help and what they can do, and that's good. Of course, we probably don't agree all the time with what they ultimately end up doing sometimes, and that's just part of politics and part of life, and our farmers will accept that too. We'll provide all the facts we can, and then the best decision can be made. That's how you really do.
Yeah. With the new administration in office and this push towards clean energy and that kind of thing, he's got this huge environmental bill coming out. I don't know if you're privy to any of what's going on in that bill.
I've read up on parts of it. I haven't kind of dove into it as deep as I probably should or would, just as its pieces are coming off. We're seeing a lot of our farmers too. Wind farms are really been big in the southern part of the state and central part of the state.
Oh, really?
And solar farms, you're going to see more and more of those starting to pop up too. We've got a lot of solar companies that are starting to work with our farmers that are, they're again bringing that energy to their farm and then being to sell it back into the grid. So those have been the two biggest, I think, when it comes to environmental assists that the farmers are giving. Up here, it just doesn't work. We're too urbanized up here to have those large fields, so we're not going to see solar fields up here unless it's your local school or library that's on there. But down in central southern Illinois, you see the windmills and you'll see the solar farms that are really starting to go up. I just drove by one in Galena a couple weeks ago when I was out there, and it was massive, a massive solar farm that on their land. I think they're realizing that farmers, we've always realized that we have to give back to the environment, and how that happens definitely changes over the years too. 30 years ago, guys were going to be putting solar on their property or windmills on their property. They're going to go, no way, you're not touching my dirt. But they've realized that changes, and it has changed. And I think with new, as our older farmers are retiring or no longer with us, and those family members are stepping up, there are new ideas and there's new ways of farming. And just because Dad and Grandpa did it this way, we've got to look for different outlets and different ways to do it. And I think that's a good push.
Absolutely. Calvin, you want to ask Anna's questions?
Yeah, let's pull that up. Let's see here. So curious about any farm legislation in particular. We've been having a lot of bills being pushed through recently. I was curious if there were any at the top of your guys' radar.
Right now there hasn't been a lot that's come up that has piqued us. We have action requests that have come out so far. If there's an issue that's really going to affect either our farmers here or at the state level or national level, we'll get teed up on those. And I'll tell you, in the past several months, we really haven't had any that have jumped off the radar at us, which is good. But that doesn't mean that there might be something that does. We're with this administration, especially, we're starting to just see where they're at, what they're going to do, and what their plans are. But nothing that's really jumped out at the state or national level yet.
And one specific area of policy that I'm curious if it's a concern for the community is fracking, because it has been correlated with damaging local soil and waterways. So has that been a concern for the farming community?
Not up here. It is when you get down in southern Illinois and some of the southern states, it is. Again, that's kind of out of my realm because it's not something that we would have to deal with up here. But I know it is an issue, and it's something they take pretty serious when you get down to those southern states. And we follow up again. Up here, we're not dealing with it, so we don't really have an issue or talk about it as much. But you can guarantee it's going to continue to be talked about, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's very controversial.
It's not going away. You betcha
no.
it is.
Biden started with being anti-fracking, now he's pro-fracking, and a lot of people are not happy about that. That's something that I need to do more research on, for sure. I don't know a lot about it. My understanding is that it can be done right, but it's really hard to do it right. That's my it's very vague. Is that accurate?
I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
There's a way to do it, and if they're going to do it, if it's done right, it's perfect. If it's done wrong, there's going to be some issues.
Yeah. So then let me ask you about, and hopefully this will lead us into your agricultural classroom situation, which is very cool. I want to hear more about it. When I was going through the curriculum, the program at CLC for horticulture, one thing that came up several times is this fear of a lack of farmers in the very near future. Like as the older generations retire, if you will, pass away, younger people are just not into farming anymore, man. They just don't want to do it. I mean, you have some, obviously, but are you aware of this? Is there a statistical issue going on as far, are we going to run out of farmers?
Yeah. I think the average age of our farmer now, and it's got to be something, it's like 58 to 62 years old is the average age of the farmers. So look at that. I mean,
that's the average
age. So we've seen up here a big change. There's not a lot of them. If it's been in the family take me for instance, there's 4 generations. I was the last generation. We moved off the farm, and would I continued farming if we kept the farm? I don't know, because like I said, I missed out on baseball and this as a kid and did that. Not that I didn't love farming, but I think a lot of these younger generations, they've helped their parents on the farm through high school and college. They saw the hard work that mom and dad did. And grandparents, they saw that they didn't get to go on vacation to Cabo, and they weren't going to Florida every several years. So I think the kids in their mind have gone away and said, I don't know that I want to come back to the farm and have that lifestyle and work as hard as my parents did, because it is hard work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of parents that have pushed their kids to say, hey, we want you to go get, maybe it's a degree in, we've got some farmers around here, their kids are vets now, or they're working for a seed company, or they're working for John Deere as an engineer. So they may not be coming back to the farm per se, but there are a large amount of those younger generations that are going into an ag-related field that they're exposed to. But it is a fear. There is definitely a concern of, who's going to be farming 30 years from now, 20 years from now. Those 60-year-olds are probably not going to be around, and they're not going to be able to do it. So there's definitely, but it's kind of funny. I'll get some folks that'll just pop in the office sometimes and say, I want to start farming. And they're 20 something, 30 something, and they worked in the corporate world for 20 years and they're 40 and they want to start a farm. Up here it's difficult just because our land values are so high that you really can't just say, I'm going to start farming today. It's not going to work. If you get into that central Illinois, southern Illinois area, where a young family or a young couple could start to get some land and start to farm, we're seeing that happen. And the good thing is we're still, the majority is family farms around here. We don't have the big mega farms. We like that it's still that family farm. Right. There's still decisions being made at the family level, because that's important, because you're getting all these decisions that are being made that are reflective of those family values and what most of us around here know is important too. So it'll be interesting to watch. But I think we're seeing more kids like George White, the one we talked about, that I'm in touch with you to be on here too. There's a young early 20s that's kind of his goal and his life is to take over the family garden center that he has there and continue to run that. So it's refreshing to see young minds and young people like that wanting to do that too. And again, you go to the Hort program at CLC, it's great. It's an awesome program. It's an opportunity for kids to become exposed to that where, they probably never would have otherwise. They didn't grow up on a farm. So it gives them an opportunity for that too.
Are there any governmental incentive plans, anything like that? Like, hey, you want to get into farming, I'll pay for your college degree and give you lots of money to open a farm.
Yeah, we do offer through the Farm Bureau itself for our members. We offer about $5,000 in scholarships a year to students that are going into an ag-related field. Now that could be, like I said, a vet. It could be an engineer for John Deere, whatever they want to do. So there are opportunities, and there are those programs where kids could, and there's still you move, just go a little south of here, get down to Springfield now, and there's still FFA, the Future Farmer of America chapters down there, where those kids are in those programs, and I've gone and sat in some, and this group of 30 kids, they are going to be farmers, and that's what they want to do, and that's what they don't know anything different than that, and they don't want to know anything different. So that's refreshing. We may see maybe some of those kids will start to migrate up here if traffic doesn't push them away. So, but yeah, it's there's always that concern, but we haven't run out of farmers up here. We're just running out of the land up here, and Lake County really is our biggest issue.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the development is outrageous, and they're still doing it. Do you live in Grays Lake? I kind of get in that impression.
I do. Yeah, I'm in Grays Lake too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and so like just over here off of Peterson, there's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, Medline and that whole area.
Medlines, some more semis and whatever. Okay, yeah. But Calvin, if you don't have a question, I wanted to go on to the classroom thing. But do you have a question?
Oh, I've got a few,
okay,
but let's go on to the classroom thing because I think that's important. Let's hear about it.
Okay, talk about the agriculture in the classroom thing.
Cool. And that was my baby when I started 23 years ago with Farm Bureau. I was in charge of that program, so it's been fun to watch it grow. We've got a staff member, my information director, Andy, who handles that, and we every year we have 3 presenters that we send out into classrooms. So it's a free presentation, free of charge. We'll go into, in a given year, we can see up to 10,000 kids sometimes over that year period before the pandemic. We've had to shift, and I'll get to that in a minute, how we've changed, but they'll go into a 45-minute classroom, and that day it might be a lesson on dairy, big dairy or apples or the environment, water quality, ice, how to make ice cream for the littler kids. So it just depends on the age level.
Oh, cool.
And our goal is we have some good relationships with schools. We're in every grade in that school. And we've got some where it might just be one teacher that loves the program. But we bring out ag mags, which are kind of a learning tool, allows the kids to do some activities, see different careers that are involved in agriculture. So those go on. During the pandemic, we've shifted and we made ag bags, where we put all the materials in there, and sent thousands of these have gone out to the schools during the pandemic, and kids have taken them home. Teachers have getting them to the kids, which is awesome. Yeah. And then we try to go in with some of our online learning too for them too. So we try and make sure what we're teaching kind of equates to the learning standards in Illinois, so the teachers can easily put it into their curriculum. We sponsor several $1,000s a year in teacher grants. So if a teacher coming up with the program wants to do a classroom garden, or wants to take the kids on a field trip to look at an organic farm or purchase materials for an ag lesson, we'll give up to $200 to $500 to a classroom. But then go ahead and do that too. So we've had a lot of teachers take advantage of that. And then just like our Adopt a Legislator program, at once a year, we'll take about 15 to 20 teachers. We give them for a whole week. We put them on a bus. We take them around the county. We'll take them to a dairy farm. We'll have to go to Wisconsin for that because we don't have any dairy farms. We'll take them to a seed distributor. We'll take them to the Board of Trade in Chicago. We'll take them to botanic gardens. So we try and indoctrinate them to all that ag has to offer, and then give lesson plans to them that they can go back and incorporate those into their school year too. So that's really been awesome. We've had teachers just excited. There's usually a waiting list. We don't charge for that program either. So it's been a great opportunity to just expose them to ag. We want to escape the, chocolate milk comes from a brown cow kind of thing. And we're kids where their mindsets are. And it's funny when you ask that, where does my hamburger comes from McDonald's, but they don't understand how it got there. So that's what we want to do. That's probably, if you had to look at our board's commitment, I would say the agriculture in the classroom program is probably the direction where we spend a lot of our energy and a lot of our time and a lot of our money to make sure we get it out there. Again, we want to keep farming alive, and we want those youngsters to go back to their parents and say, "Hey, this lady came to our classroom today and was telling us about this, and you should maybe read this, Mom." And it's worked out really well. And it's all fact driven. It's all science related. There's math in there, so we're trying to hit every curriculum there that they can.
That's really great. I mean, seriously, that educate the children while they're young enough while they're young so they grow up with this understanding under their belt for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so speaking of showing them where hamburgers come from, I'm assuming you're going to forego showing them the slaughterhouse videos.
Yes. We don't do anything that'll scare any children. And we really like I touched on briefly before. Is we had when I started here 23 years ago, I think we had three dairy farms at least still in the county, and we're down to one now. And this county used to be, if you go back in the 50s and 60s, there were dairy farms everywhere in this county.
Yeah.
So we're down to one, which is one of the biggest ones, Golden Oaks, out in Wakanda. They've got several hundred, I want to say 600 or 700 cattle out there that they milk, cows that they milk out there. But other than that, we really don't have any livestock in the county. You'll see a couple small farmers that may have a couple cattle for their kids that they're raising for the 4-H fair, but they don't have the herds like they used to have. Like our biggest, you go out on the western portion of the county, and equine's big, but it's just, the families that have larger lots out there that have a horse or two. So we don't have the, and even need to get into McHenry and of course Cook County and Kane County, you just don't see the livestock like they do down south anymore. It doesn't work with the urban environment around here. A neighbor doesn't want to move next to a hog operation and put a 500 development home. It's just not going to work. We're not compatible. So, and it's a challenge too. We've had people call the police on our farmers if they're out in their fields at 10 o'clock at night if they're farming. Because they're creating dust or it's too loud and they can't go to sleep because they hear the tractor in the background. And it's an education process, and I think that's the one thing that we try to do and try to teach folks that here's what's going to happen if you move in next to a farm, and here's why that farmer is out there at 10 o'clock at night, because there's a storm coming in tomorrow, and if he doesn't get that planted, there's an issue. If he doesn't get harvested, we're going to have an issue. So there's just people don't always think about that, and we're always happy to explain that, and we want them to understand that too.
Right.
Nice.
Real quick, and then Calvin, you can take over. How has the pandemic affected farming in Lake County?
It really didn't change. Our farmers, I think their biggest disappointment is they couldn't get together in those groups anymore. Like everybody, they couldn't come together as a board. We never had a Zoom meeting before, and I don't think they ever knew what Zoom was back then. And I said, we're going to all talk to each other on a computer.
I didn't.
It was just, everything changed. I said the technology. But I think it changed their ability to, now they can't make my meeting that we usually have once a month. But they said, hey, I can Zoom in from my tractor and still be able to be at that meeting, and I can still have my input. Where before they just wouldn't have shown up, and they couldn't show up because they had to take care of the family farm. So I think that they were understanding, and a lot of them were, they're on that older spectrum too. I mean, they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s. So they took it serious because they didn't want to die, and they didn't want to get sick, and they didn't want to have another relative. So it changed, but I think if anything, farmers are always resilient. They're some of the toughest people out there, and they'll come back from a drought, they'll come back from a flood, and they'll come back from a pandemic. So and they've had a really great growing season this spring. So it was kind of last year they kind of couldn't talk to each other, and this spring has been fantastic so far. So it's all changes every year. You never know what it's going to be. It's kind of like a baseball team. You got a winning year, you got a losing year. You go back to that mound the next year and you do it again, just because you love what you're doing.
Very cool.
I love
it. All right, I know Anna just asked another question. If you want to take the reins there, Calvin.
Sure. Let's see what she's got cooking. Okay. So there wasn't any legislation that was high on the priority list. You guys were doing your awesome thing. Is there legislation that you'd like to see come in the future?
Off the top, there's nothing I can think of right now that I would say. I think I just want to make sure that right to farm is left alone, and that our farmers have that ability. Nothing off the top of my head that I could tell her that.
What can you talk more about right to farm? I mean, is somebody threatening people not to farm, or what does that mean?
Yeah, I think just the ability to have that ability to continue to farm the way they have farmed for so many years, and not have, like I said, that neighborhood come in and change it, or some zoning changes come in and would say, you're not going to be able to do this anymore because of X, Y, and Z. I think they just want to continue to have that ability.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
What about something that would perhaps spur on? I'm thinking from the city perspective, living up in Chicago, and I grew up in the farm areas. 4-H fair was the closest, biggest thing in the year for me. Grew up driving a tractor, though we didn't have a farm ourselves. We were surrounded by cornfields. Small high school, 150 people, so very similar to the one you mentioned before.
Yep.
And I wonder if it would help in these more industrialized urban communities to have a community gardens system set up and to constantly be trying to reconnect people with where the food comes from and how to cultivate it. What would you think of something like that?
Absolutely, 100%. And some of those grant monies we've given out to the schools too. We started a community garden out in North Chicago. We started another one out in Waukegan, kind of spurred it. And it's really cool because we'll start it, we'll give some funding to get the product they need and the seeds, and then we'll come back and watch these kids, how they were doing it. Like, community gardens are fantastic. I think it gives folks a better appreciation for what goes into getting that food. And it gives you the opportunity, just we talked about before, you want to try kind of semi-organic. Community farms are hard if you're doing organic, but you want to try some organics, try it over here and compare, and to just get your hands dirty and understand it yourself, instead of just reading something on Facebook that'll tell you this is good or this is bad, or you should do this, you shouldn't do that. You'll kill a few plants along the way and you'll get a better appreciation for it. Yeah, community gardens, they're fantastic. And I think the resurgence of our farmers markets around here too. One in Grays Lake is huge. It is our favorite.
It's awesome. A really good one.
It's fantastic. And some of these other towns, we get towns every year. I'll get a town that'll call to say, I want to start a community garden, or I want to start a farmers market. And there's been about 5 or 6 that we've helped over the years, and they're really great to see people come out and people with their their reusable bags that they're out there with, and they got their hats on, and they're just, I think it brings them back to the farm as well. The guy that's selling candles there and makeup, well, it's not really the farmers market side, but it works and it gets people there, so it works. But
having some crafts and novelties is probably helping, for sure.
It draws a few people in there, but that just to see people again coming back and to just simplistic things like that. We're going to go get corn, and all our vegetables tonight are going to be from the farmers market. They're going to eat, and kids understand that.
So great, farm to table.
Yeah. It is fantastic. So those are important to do. So absolutely, at community gardens, 100%.
Well, I am so happy to hear that the the working class members in the farming community have that resiliency, and they've been pushing through, and I'm glad that they're having success with this recent spring coming along. That's excellent news to hear. I want to highlight how important farming is. If people aren't connecting yet, I'm hoping this will get them on board. But you've got hops for your beer. You've got cider mills for your awesome ciders. You've got wine grapes. I mean, you've got
marijuana.
You've got marijuana. That's a newly legalized route. You got maple bees with syrup. Syrup's amazing. You got bees with honey and all the agricultural related with them. So if you didn't feel connected before, hope you do now. And I suggest to everybody who's thinking of starting up some farming, maybe they did see their grandparents or their parents struggled with the farm and have faced some tougher times. And that's why I highly suggest a worker cooperative. I have heard of farms working as a worker cooperative. It's democratic control of the business, which means egalitarian wise, everybody has the same voting power to suggest what the business does and how it does it and what it does with its surplus. But it also distributes the burden as well. Everybody is a worker owner in a worker cooperative to be a full member, and that means that you care about the longevity of the business as well as how well it does and what your wage is. So it kind of evens the playing field there. And we talked about it right before the show. You've heard of worker co-op farms, but what do you think of such a suggestion if young people were interested?
If there's a way to get more people farming, no matter what that is, 100%. I think there's a lot of different ways and a lot of things we're going to have to think outside of the box as we continue moving forward here with agriculture of what's going to work. And like I said, what worked 30 years ago might not work anymore now. So you do see that. We see even example of that is we have some there's some landowners that we have, not right here, but you go down south a little bit in the central part of the state. It could be a landowner that just they may have sold a lot of land years ago. They invested in property down there. They don't farm. They just own it. They rent it out to the farmer. But on some cases, we're seeing where that landowner doesn't just take a cash rent. They actually put money into it with the farmer. So they're hoping that that farmer does good too, because then in turn, they're doing better too. So it's not just, you pay me $200 an acre to rent my land. Maybe you pay me $50 an acre, but I'm also putting a percentage, into that farm as well on the seeds and purchasing that. So you see that mini cooperative there, where you've got a landowner, you've got a farmer kind of trying to work together for the best things. So I think any opportunity to do that wouldn't hurt. And it's, I'm sure it's being done in some areas. You look at some of these other, some of these large farms where you may have 5 or 6 different families that are involved in it. So they're all making different decisions and all bring different expertise to it. I think it's important to have. There's a young fella I know too, I think it's 3 generations involved in the farm now. It's uncles and aunts, and they all have, he fixes the machines, but he also is planting, and the other guy's doing the seed buying, and this guy's the technology expert, and here's the bank expert, and here's the land buyer. So you need those different ideas and this different expertise to do it. Yeah,
like you mentioned, it's become a more technical area. You gotta know things. I'm sure even having somebody who is is it entomology, the study of bugs?
Yeah, the bugs,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So the amount of people that come into our office thinking we're the U of I extension with their bag of bugs or their weeds that they can't get out and everything. So we see them coming, we just kind of direct them over there. But they, there's so many things that you can't be an expert in all of them, but you can try and learn as much as you can and bring somebody else in that might know a little bit more about what you're struggling on.
With all the urgency of so many different issues going on, from climate change to the removal of topsoil, how we're dealing with soil in the first place, and how as a carbon sink and that kind of thing, potentially a lack of farmers in the near future, which would cause serious problems with obviously food production. And you say you're not aware of any sort of initiatives or anything like that. Do you think that at least maybe even local governments, like Anna just posted a thing about how a public bank could help give low interest loans to help new business startups, including farmers? I mean, do you think at least, forget about the national level, it doesn't make any sense. But I mean, local counties and towns, do you think they should get more involved in dealing with these things? Because we have to have farmers. And we have to have farms. And if we run out of farmers, then, the soil quality doesn't even matter. But of course, if we have enough farmers, then soil quality specifically matters. I mean, what do you think needs to be done? What's the prescription for all this, if you will?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball or that formula that would figure it out there. I think it has to be a group effort, and it has to be an effort. It's refreshing to see politicians, for the most of the time, kind of leave the farmer alone, because I think they respect that profession. I don't respect other professions, but I think it's a tried and true profession that they understand what they're doing, and I think it has been helped. Sometimes government hinders different.
Oh, absolutely.
It clearly does. But in some efforts here, we've had government that's helped us and made, when we had years ago, we had an issue with the farm stand that wanted to open. So you don't have a permit because you're only open so many. So we had to figure out how do you have this vegetable stand that wants to open 3 months out of the year? Do you charge them the same business license as the guy that's, open 24 hours a day at the gas station in the corner? How do you do that? So there has to be some exceptions made in order to keep farming active and alive and profitable, because if it's not, and that farmer is getting more and more restrictions on him or her, they're going to say, developer ABC, I'll take that check, I'll see you later, I don't have time to deal with this anymore. So and we don't,
it's too hard, it's exhausting.
And you look at that, I mean, the land is a lot worth more than what they're getting off of it every year, but they want to farm and they want to be there. They could have sold the land years ago if they didn't want to do that. But farmers, like I said, it's in their blood. It's part of who they are, and we're fortunate that that's the outlook they have on it. And hopefully those younger generations realize that it's not a bad profession. There's kids that don't want to go into the office every day, that don't want to schedule, that don't want to have to answer to somebody. Well, you're answering to Mother Nature when you're with farming about it. So could be a good year, could be a bad year.
There's another angle that I wanted to bring up for our viewers, maybe a little treat at the end here, and that is to have them look up their local food cooperative. So that's different from a workers cooperative, but it's just maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. But to my understanding, it's just you're buying a share of the crops, guaranteed for that season, right?
Yep. Yep. Could be $300-$400. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it could be. I think you pay a fee kind of in the beginning of the year. It's $300 or $400 that you're putting into whatever it is, and then it might be this week you're bringing home radishes. You got a bunch of radishes and lettuce and something else, and next week it could be some raspberries that are coming in, and the following week it could be corn. Just the CSA, they're huge. And there's there was Prairie Crossing had a pretty big one for a while. There was one up in Millburn too. It was where the horses are up there. I'm trying to blank right now, but it's Temple Farms up there. They did it. And then I know there's several others that pop up here and there on a smaller scale, but those are fantastic too. They give you a great opportunity to, especially for people that might live in a townhome or a condo, or don't have the yard, or don't have the ability, the time to do it, to still feel that they are somehow involved with that. It's
also great for specialty options. So you were mentioning that organics does take quite a bit of work and effort. Takes a huge investment in time as well. So there's stuff like, even more specialty than that, like say pasture raised only chicken is a pretty intense thing. You've got to let the chickens roam and get to different bugs and grubs in the ground, and you're not going to feed them much grain at all, if any at all. So they're purely pasture raised. So a farmer is going to have a hard time like pushing and making pasture raised chicken and having that be what they sell when there's no investment up front, when they're not sure if that's going to sell or if that's going to pay off. But if you have a farming, a food cooperative set up, well, then you've already got it paid up front. You can push for something like that if that's the demand that the customers have, or that they want to try it or see what it's like. So I think it would help a lot of local farmers out, especially to be connected with the community more through a food co-op.
Sure, you do. It spreads that burden too a little bit more, like you said too, which is it helps. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're all in this together. Farming is way too important for everybody. It's one of those things, it's not like buying a Lamborghini. Who cares? This is something that everybody has to eat. Okay, so this is an extremely important issue for sure. Whether it be vegetables, grains, or livestock, we all need to do something about it, because it's starting to kind of look a little sketchy. As far as the more we go on, the more I read about this stuff, I'm like, oh man, this is not good. We only have a couple minutes left. Greg, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I learned a great deal about stuff tonight. That's very cool. Calvin, do you have any last minute questions for Greg?
I wanted to prompt our guest here to guide the public to see where and how they can find out this more information about these programs.
Yeah, they absolutely can visit our website, which is lcfb.com. They can become a member if they want to get our monthly publication that comes out that kind of just gives an update if they want to be involved in agriculture. But if anything, it's tell those teachers that you want to have that Farm Bureau come to the classroom to talk to your kids. I mean, that's word of mouth is where their program's growing. I think that's one of the best things they can do is get those early folks up there and get them to very nice. Like you popped it up there quick. But yeah, we are and people call us that aren't members of the Farm Bureau, and I absolutely still help them. It doesn't matter. Agriculture is important to everybody, and that's the one great thing about this organization is we're willing to offer help where we can and if we can.
Great.
Wow. Greg, absolutely great work. Thank you so much for coming on.
You bet.
Yes, thank you.
Super interesting stuff. David, did you have a sneaky last quick question?
No. I have 1,000 more questions. Again, at the end, you go into every interview thinking you can think of a couple of questions, and then by the end you're like, well, I have so much more to ask you. It's almost every single time. But I can't do that now. I wanted to talk about the advancements in farming technology. If that would take some of the fear and worry off younger people, farming's so hard, and it's still hard. I get that, but nowadays you don't have to stand behind the single blade plow with your yak in front of you or anything. It's not like that anymore. I see these guys in their big, combines, whatever else, and they're drinking coffee and they got their, iPad in front of them. So they're not saying that farming is easy, because it's not. Because they still got to get out there and do stuff too. But it's not like it used to be. We're not in, ancient times. So hopefully that might encourage some people. We need people to get into farming. And I think the organic movement, I mean, the green movement is kind of becoming a thing. I think I hope to see a lot more interest in organic, at least small organic farms. I think everybody, I was a bartender for a long time. Almost everybody I asked about it says, sure, of course we prefer organic. It's just too expensive. Well, one of the ways to get that less expensive is to have more farms. Anyway, we're out of time. Greg Capon, thank you very much. Executive Director of Lake County Farm Bureau. I'm your host. This is Green Party Series. I'm your host, David Rich, with Calvin Tomashko. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Until next time, be good, be green.